And as we were talking earlier with Rabbi Mintz, I really want to give Rabbi Leibtag yeshua because he was the first one. He asked us, this is the first time we're doing a Saturday night class. So what year was Midnight Medrash that we did? I don't know, 2015. When did we do Midnight Medrash?
I'm too old to remember things like that.
Yeah, you don't remember those
things.
Shichacha. Well, that's on Shavuot, like a Shichacha. But and then your Slicha Shirim. So Bakasha. Okay, all yours. You got 29 minutes and 50.
This is a challenge to do something in a half hour.
Yes. Okay.
So I'll do a half of this year. I want to talk about the number 7. It's been an important number ever since day 1, correct? Now, just tell me stories in Sefer Bereshit that have to do with the number 7, other than creation. Does 7 ever come up again? I want to discuss why is the holiday called weeks? I call Chag HaMatzot because we eat matzah. Sukkah is we eat in a sukkah. But either call it Zman Matan Tortenu, call it Chag Katzir. But why would we call the holiday weeks? What I want to explain in this year is what's so important about the concept of a week and how it relates to both Matan Torah and grain harvest. Got it? So just to explain why, I want to develop in the short share tonight how Chumash develops the meaning of the number 7. Okay? So give me stories in Bereshit that have the number 7 in it. Can you think of anybody? You can unmute if you want to say.
The years that Yaakov worked for Rachel and Leah.
7 years, right? 7 years for each wife.
I mean, creation story, 7 days.
Avram has to give 7 lambs.
7 lambs, that's right, for his thing.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, Yosef.
And after Leah was substituted, he had to do Malay Shavuot Azot.
Yeah, that's a good question. Is that the promise or the week? That's a whole interesting topic.
Paro's dream.
That's the only time we had the concept of a week. That's cool.
Paro's dreams.
Paro's dream. And what's Paro dreaming about? 7 years of famine and 7 years of plenty?
Right.
Getting married has to do with plural. But I'm getting at, whenever there's something that relates to nature, you'll find the number 7. Got that? Now, how many holidays other than Shavuot relate to the number 7? Chag HaMatzot is 7 days. Not because Kriyat Yam Suf happened on the 7th day. The commandment for 7 days is on Parshat HaChodesh already. Sukkot is 7 days. In the 7th month, we have all these holidays. Whenever there's something, and all the Shalosh Regalim, they're all agricultural, the number 7 is always the star. Any life cycles that relate to the number 7 in Sefer Vayikra? Yeah. Rabbi J, you're smiling. Give me some examples.
Not
Too
too
much,
much
7
right now,
days.
but there's the 7
What
days.
type of Tumat Torah? Tumat Zav, Tumat Zava.
Shemitah.
Shemitah for sure is going to be 7. But anything that has to do with birth, with nature, is 7. I want to try and explain why. What's the Hebrew word for war? We hear it too often today. War in Hebrew. Milchama, right? What little word is hiding in Milchama?
Lechem.
Anyone know why?
Because that's what you make war over. It's economics.
We make a bracha over lechem, don't we?
No,
I'm joking. We make. What happens when there's not enough food? People go to war for food, don't they? A food shortage will cause a war, and therefore the word for nechama, that's the etymology of the word. And therefore a soldier is called a lochem. But nechama, now, I'm just trying to show you how important lechem is. Now, if you don't want to have to go to war for bread, what do you need to do? You need to make sure your bread grows. Now, what can the farmer do to make sure he has bread? He can plant this. He can be a diligent farmer. Just read Isaiah chapter 5 if you want an example of a diligent farmer who gets upset because things don't grow. But you can be the most diligent farmer, but there's 2 things out of your control that you need for things to grow. What are they?
Rain.
You need rain and fertility. You need good soil. You need soil that knows how to give us. You need adama shitenet tivula, if you know what I'm talking about in Hebrew, and you need matar from the Shemaim. Now, if without those you don't have food and nothing will grow. what did ancient men, what did the people in Canaan do before we came? What did they do to make sure that rain came at the right time?
Pray to Baal.
That's right. Who's the rain god? And to make sure that fertility was working, they prayed to Asherah. And those are the gods of nature. And it makes perfect sense. Don't take me too seriously. But there's logic to idol worship. It's not stam narishkeit. There's logic because I need those powers, and if those powers are like humans, I can buy them off. I can praise them. I can feed them. I can take them out to a business lunch, and I'll get my client. So therefore, the ancient custom, which we call idol worship, avodah zarah, was simply turning to the powers of nature to help you. Now, what's Chumash telling you? That all those powers of nature stem from one God, from one source. Now, what's the word for other gods in Hebrew? Elohim. Now, El means power. And therefore, all the powers of nature, they're called Elohim Acharim, other gods. How does Chumash teach us that all those powers that appear to be many gods is really one God? Now, we just conjugate Elohim in the singular and we call him Elohim, correct? We say Vayomer Elohim. The opening lines of Chumash teach us in a backhanded way what monotheism is. We take the word for many gods, which we beautifully say Elohim to refer to our God, and Elohim means other gods. And what are we saying? We're saying that those gods aren't really, what are they? They are, they appear to be gods, but there's one God. And if we need rain, who do we turn to? Turn to the right God. But that's stage one. This one God who created everything, who tells us there's one God in charge of all the rain, but he doesn't give us rain based on our prayers or based on our ritual, but rather on what? Based on our behavior. I pray to God to remember that God's in charge of the rain and not other gods, but to be worthy of God's help, I need to act in a way to be worthy of rain. Some people have a custom to say the second parsha of Kriyat Shema every day, which is everything I just told you, right? If you follow my laws I'm teaching you, then the land will give the sky will give its grain, and the land will give its fruit. If you don't listen, it sounds like that there's power to the sky and power to the ground, but God's in charge of those powers. Now, that idea is revolutionary when it comes to religion, because everyone believed in powers and gods, small g. Along comes Chumash and says, no, there's only one God, but that one God judges civilization and community based on their behavior. And therefore, it's not enough for me to be good, we have to be good. Which means that'll give an incentive for leadership, for being involved in society. And if people really believe that, we call that emunah as opposed to emunah. I sort of jokingly say emunah is believing that God's working for me. If I ask hard enough, I'll get. Emunah means I get what we deserve. So therefore, the idea of emunah is key, is one of the key biblical themes. Therefore, every time, if I look at the Shlosh Regalim in Chumash, every holiday has something agricultural about it. Now remember, in the land of Israel, there's only 2 months of grain harvest a year. That we all know. From mid-April to mid-June is the only time you can get grain in Israel. And therefore, the grain that grows during that grain harvest has to last the entire year. The Aviv, which we call spring, is the name for the beginning of the grain harvest season. And for the next 2 months, we're worried about our grain harvest. What do we talk about during those 7 weeks? How come we're counting weeks? Because we need to remember that the grain harvest, which is going to make or break our what we're going to eat, our lechem for that whole year, is not only up to us, it's also up to God. Now, I want to share with you, actually, let me share my screen for a second. Which one? I'm going to just open up a Chumash for a minute. I'll show you something which is the laning for, I hope I got this right. That's good. I'm going to share, it's being transcribed, that's okay. We need to open up a regular Chumash. Here we go. We want to open up, we need Sefer Vayikra, correct? What we're good at, we lane second, no, we lane this, I forgot what day we lane. No, we do call up our second day. We read this on Perach Chav Gimel and Vayikra. Then we have the Moedim of Hashem, Moedei Hashem, Moedam, etc. We have all these laws about about the holidays, and then we have what's called the laws of the Omer. Now, tell Bnei Israel in chapter 23 in Vayikra, verse 9 and 10. When you come to the land which I'm giving you, and you begin your grain harvest, you bring Omer from the beginning of your grain harvest, which is barley, and you wave it in front of God like a trophy. You wave it in front of God, and then we count 7 weeks. The psukim we just finished saying tonight. You can't eat from the new harvest until you bring the symbolic korban. Later we'll talk about why we call it Omer. And here's what I want to show you. We count 7 weeks, a total of 50 days. We go from 7 times 7 in the 50. We bring a meal offering from the new wheat to God, and we bring a special korban with it. And then look how we end. At the end of that day, we have a gathering, call out to God, can't do any work, and that's our love forever. The whole parak, this whole section, is a build up to the Pasach HaBet. Why? Remember how it began? When you come to land and begin your grain harvest in the spring, count the Omer and count 7 weeks and talk about Omer every day. But when you're harvesting your grain, okay, don't take every corner, leave over a corner of your field, and leave over leket, like the little the wheat that falls down when you're collecting it. I forgot the name. What's a shibolet in English? The sheaves that fall down. Leave them over. Leave them for the poor, the stranger, the widow, etc. Right? Ani Hashem Elokeichem. It sounds like the 10 Commandments. And this pasuk is a copy paste from Kedoshim Tiyu. And that phrase Ani Hashem Elokeichem is the opening line of the 10 Commandments. In other words, why am I counting the Omer in the land of Israel during my grain harvest? The reason is quite simple, because I need to remember during my grain harvest that even though I need to hoard, I need to collect as much as possible, I have to make sure that I still take into consideration the less fortunate people. And there's a whole Megillah about it called Megillat Ruth. And therefore I count 7 weeks, make a big about it, but I'm counting weeks. And I call them Shabbatot. It means I'm reminding myself of the whole theme of creation, which is coming to tell us that there's one God who judges us based on our behavior. Now, if you believe in idol worship, and I believe that the source of my prosperity is a function of multiple gods, there's no connection between my moral behavior and our ethical society and our prosperity. Lokam Chumash says, if you want to be successful, if you want God to bless you, you better be good. And if things go bad, if there's a famine, pandemic, war, that's a sign that God's not happy with you. Now, if people really internalize that because they want to have food on the table, they don't want to have to go to war, then they'll be good. Don't you understand that that's basically the simple pshat of ethical monotheism at the simplest level, which is Chumash's primary message. Later, God's going to pick a nation to be the model nation for that happening, because we'll be a nation that is blessed profusely when they keep these laws, and they're punished profusely when they don't keep the laws. Remember the Tochachot? I'm going to bless you to the nth degree if you be that model society. I'm going to punish you to the nth degree, up to the point of exile, if you don't follow those laws. That was the Tochacha last week or 2 weeks ago in Bar B'chukotai, in Kitavo. It's every day in Shema. It's not a vort. It's the most primary message of Chumash, I think, when you look at it at the pshat level. And we need to be a nation that has to be the example of that for good or for bad. Now, this theme of 7, the first Shabbos experience the Jewish people have, I'll just review this quickly and make sure we have enough time now. The first Shabbos that we have is with the manna in the desert. Remember? We know about Shabbos before the 10 Commandments because God says, Zachor Yom HaShabbat L'Kadsho. What was our first Shabbos experience? We run out of food in the desert after a month. And we had the thing in Maran, then we get to Elim, and we get to Midbar Sin, no food, people complain, and God says it's going to rain from heaven. Now, I'll just briefly go over the sources and go back to the main source sheet for today. I want to review, I'm pretty sure I've done this year before, but it's important to review the key theme of it. So let me just take we talked about nature in the 7 days of creation and our holiday calendar, etc. And then we have the Moedim in chapter 23. And it's just of the sources, so you can look at them later on. But you see the number 7 there is very key. And how they build up to those. Whenever there's an agricultural holiday, be it the grain harvest, the fruit harvest, or worrying about the upcoming rain, we're worried about what's coming up, and we're taking out for what happened before. And we just relate all that nature things to 7. Now, so we did these psukim. In chapter 16 in Shmot, before the manna comes, God tells Moshe, Hini mamtir lechem lechem min hashamayim, I'll give you bread from heaven. The people go collect Dvar Yom B'Yomo every day at a time to test them, or to prepare them, will they follow my Torah or not. In other words, the manna experience is going to be preparation for Matan Torah. I want to use this to explain at a pshat level why the grain harvest holiday, which is the pshat of Chumash, why it relates to Matan Torah. The test of the man in the desert was not only believing that God will provide for you tomorrow, as we know from news, we see all the time from human behavior. If everyone's starving, and all of a sudden there's food coming down from heaven, everyone's going to hoard. There'll be pandemonium. God's training us to become His nation. He's going to give us food, and He wants to make sure when we collect the food as a people, as a nation, everyone takes as much as they need, not as much as they want. Now, the other test is taking double on Friday, and then not taking on Shabbat. I want to share with you an idea, an analogy, and tell me if it makes sense. Why is it okay, if you're supposed to take as much as you need, why is it okay to take double on Friday? Because that's what you need. Because it's not going to fall on Shabbat. If you went out on Shabbat, you wouldn't find any. So it's not just a belief in emunah in God, it's testing you how you treat your fellow man. So God is allowing us to take double on Friday, because taking double on Friday is the same as taking as much as you need on every other day of the week.
And
Because you won't have on Shabbat.
it's a test for future laws on Shabbos as well. It's a hint.
Yeah, we're going to see that now. In other words, God, at the most simple level, if you took too much, it didn't help you. It just rotted. If you went out to collect on Shabbat, you wouldn't find. But God's teaching you, when is it okay to hoard? When you need to. Now, remember SAT analogies? What I want to claim is, just like it's okay to take double on Friday, but only double, because you won't have on Shabbat. What happens in the land of Israel, where I have grain 2 months a year, and 10 months a year, where there's no grain? What do you have to do during your grain harvest to stay alive? You have to hoard, don't you? The nature of Israel is during our grain harvest season, because I need that grain for the rest of the year, the nature of the land of Israel is you're almost forced to hoard during grain harvest season. What's Chumash teaching you during your grain harvest? Even though I have every heter, every excuse not to care about less fortunate people, nonetheless, what do I need to do? I need to worry about them. And that's the Megillat root in a nutshell. We find the word Omerim. And therefore, why am I counting the Omer during the 7 weeks of my grain harvest? To remember the lesson of the manna experience. Not just to say that we're treating our grain like it's a gift from God, but not about saying thank you, but acting thank you. And that's exactly what Parshat Emor is saying. Is count 7 weeks, but what's the goal? When you bring your harvest, remember Leket Shicha and Peah and all the mitzvot that come with it. Now, that idea, how much to allocate, that's a big question. But what Chumash is saying is, if you want blessing on your productivity, if you want your crops to grow good, the way you become wealthy is by taking care of the poor and the needy. Understand that? Now, that's revolutionary, that idea. Because usually the way you become wealthy is by hoarding, by taking care of yourself. You become before others, your own needs, or praying to other gods. Chumash is saying there's one God in charge, and he gives you wealth if you allocate your wealth properly. And all the Nevi'im come and explain, why does God bring down the Churban? Because we weren't doing that. We weren't fulfilling that goal as a nation. Now, if I look at the laws of, if I take that idea, if the manna experience and counting the Omer was preparation for Matan Torah, then the same 7 weeks, which makes sense as an agricultural holiday, it relates to agriculture, because in its original form, those laws of manna and Omer were preparation for Matan Torah, to being God's nation. Because what's Matan Torah about? an obligation for people to serve God as a nation by how they act and how they talk and how they act not only as individuals but as a nation, then if the mana experience with our grain harp, with our food, was preparation for that event, then it makes sense that Shavuot relates to Matan Torah as well. Now, the last proof I want to bring is from the laws of what we call Shemitah. What do we have? Every 7 years, the land has to lay fallow. Remember? Now, the trees don't know it's Shemitah. But there's another law that comes with the Shemitah, with the laws of Shemitah. At the end of the Shemitah cycle, at the end of 7 years, there's a national gathering called Hakel. We're all familiar with? Hakel, for sure, is reliving Mamad Har Sinai. When did we do Hakel? I'll share my screen again. I'll go to the source sheet. Here we are. It should be this one. Which one? This one here. Probably this one. Did it open up? Share. Okay, here we are. Remember, what did God say? How much do you take in Omer per person? And they measure with Omer. What the Omer is, I'm saying the word Omer and the mana go hand in hand. We'll leave what exactly what Omer leaves alone for now. And then we talk about in Sefer Dvarim, when you're gathering your grain in the field, make sure to leave over, pretend to forget. Omer, now it's going to be like leave a bundle in the field if it falls off to your head. And don't go back and collect it. Leave it for the stranger, the orphan, the widow again, so that God will bless you. And then Moshe says the same thing in Parshat Ekev. Remember your desert experience, that for 40 years, God gave you a hard time and made you hungry to test you. Remember, he made you hungry and made you suffer, sort of it. And then he gave you the man to teach you. We don't live to eat, but we eat to live. And what to do with our food. But God's bringing you to a good land, and don't let that land make you become haughty and say, I did it all myself. That's called kochi batzimadi. Now, every 7 years, we're going to relive Matan Torah at Hakel. Remember, every 7 years, at the end of 7 years, we gather the nation together to remember the key theme of fearing God and being awe of God and following His laws and keeping the Torah. So basically what happens, and I think my time is just about up, what happens every Shemitah? If I want to relive Har Sinai, what do I need to do? I should go back to Har Sinai in the desert and have man for a couple weeks beforehand, and then teach the Torah again. Now, that's not practical, and we don't know where Har Sinai is, but we took Har Sinai with us, because Har Sinai became the Mishkan. Mishkan became the temple. Where did we do Hakel? B'makom l'shivchar Hashem, in the Beit HaMikdash. Now, in light of that, I can explain the connection between Shemitah and Har Sinai. Why? Because if I want to relive receiving the Torah every 7 years, I need to eat manna in preparation for Matan Torah, like we did in the desert. How do we get manna in the land of Israel? Well, that's exactly what the laws of Shemitah create. Because during Shemitah, the trees don't know it's a Shemitah year, and they give them fruit. But the people, even the landowners, there's fruit everywhere, and there's produce everywhere, but you can't collect it. What can you do? You can only collect as much as you need a day at a time. The land, everything's hefker, but only limited hefker. Means the landowner, he owns the land, but he doesn't own his produce. His produce is out there. Everyone can take it, but how much can everybody take? As much as you need a day at a time, and that's all you can take. So the laws of Shemitah, when they're followed, create a special environment in the land of Israel that prepares you every 7 years for Hakel. Which explains why the Parsha of Bat Shemitah begins with Bahar Sinai. Remember Parsha Bahar from last week? So that would be another reason. So if I want to go back and summarize, if I'm looking for a connection between, it's for sure Shavuot is a grain harvest holiday, like every nation has. We're tying it to the concept of a week, because the very concept of a week is training us what we do with our excess, what we do with our we need to hoard, we need to store, but we can't overdo it. So the analogy I like to give is from mammals, or especially human bodies, but any mammal. A human needs nutrition all the time, but we don't eat all the time, do we? Unless you're a nasha. We don't eat all the time. But how does the body have nutrition 24/7 if we don't eat all day long? Well, you store that energy in the form of fat. And the body knows how to regulate that. It knows when it tells you when you're hungry, etc. You regulate that idea. What happens when you store too much fat? That's already not healthy. That's called chelev. Now, if you know your halachot, when you bring a korban to God, knows who should you give your excess to? Your excess goes to God, which means you give it for those who need. So what do we do with our excess? We should give that to God. So when you bring a korban to God, shlamim, what goes on the altar? The chelev. I think that might explain why chelev is what we give to God. If you follow the biology behind it, that's the excess that we teach that sort of going to remind us of how to allocate properly. What I want to end with is just some beautiful psukim, which is exactly this idea, right from Sefer Dvarim about Shemitah. So in chapter 15 in Sefer Dvarim, let me get this on. Let you see the screen here. I'll get it going in a second. Oh, here we go. I have to move the Sefer Dvarim, chapter 15. Move this bar up. Okay. It says every 7 years you do Shemitah. Deuteronomy chapter 15. Okay, and remember we know of our loans every 7 years. Now, look at Pasuk Daled. What's it say? Efes kiloi b'chavyon. There shouldn't be an Evyon is worse than poor. He's like destitute, a needy person. There shouldn't be an Evyon. Why? Because God will bless your land that He's giving you. On what condition? On the condition you keep His mitzvot. Which mitzvot? The mitzvot of giving your excess to those who need to allocate properly. If you follow the mitzvot of Sefer Dvarim and of Parsha Mishpatim and all through Chumash, to keep the laws that God's commanding you. In other words, how do we prevent people from becoming Evyonim? We'll see in a minute. By sharing our prosperity with those who don't have. Okay? Because God will bless you if you act that way, and you'll be the one lending money, not needing loans. And then it says right away, when you have an Evyon, Kiyebech Evyon, what do you need to do in your land? Don't hold back your heart, right? Don't strengthen your heart not to give, and don't hold back your hand. Instead, what's the famous line? Open up your hand to the poor person who's in need, and give him what he needs. Now, be careful. Don't let religious laws ruin it for you. Why? Be careful when you have this bad thought saying, the Shemitah year is coming, and I have more reason to hoard. Why? Because I don't have to collect for a whole year, I have to collect for 2 years. And I have more reason not to take care of the Evyonim. Right? Why? Because I need to sort out for 2 years because I can't collect the next year. And then he'll be poor, he'll call out, and he won't happen. Instead, no tonti tenlo, make sure to give him, and don't feel bad giving him. Here's the big thing. If that's what you do, that'll cause God to bless the land. Then emunah, that my sharing my wealth and prosperity with those in need, that will cause God to give me prosperity. That's a theme you can't miss. Now listen carefully. What's Chumash telling us? There are always going to be poor people. How does God take care of the poor people? In other words, how do we make sure that there won't be Evyonim? But God gives us the ability to solve that problem, but we have to do it on His behalf. Therefore, there are always Evyonim. Therefore, I'm commanding you. Therefore, you open up your hand to those who are in need. Now, in davening, what do we say? Remember, we say Ashrei 3 times a day because of this pasuk. If you remember that the Gemara talks about why we say Ashrei 3 times a day. So, in the Ashrei, we're saying that that's what God does. My battery's running low. Okay, hoping battery will make it through this. The Evyonim, I'm sorry, in life, God takes care of them. Remember, we praise God and God. Everyone's looking for God for help. God opens His hand and gives those in need. We say that 3 times a day. But if you understand the context from Chumash we just read, in Tehillim, the way that God takes care and opens His hands by giving us the ability to do that. And that's why the rabbis say, if you say Potech Yitecha and understand that 3 times a day, you're a Ben Olam Haba, you become a partner with God, and you're worthy of the road to come. Because you and God you're working on the same team together. So that was my little. I'm trying to show you the theme of 7, and the core, like a core underlying message of Matan Torah, is becoming a nation that represents God by our national behavior and how we use prosperity. The goal isn't to be poor, but there's always poor people, those people in need. How we allocate, how we balance, how we take our prosperity and use it as a tool to serve God, and how we act in a way that sanctifies God through our national behavior. And that belief that the powers of nature are in the hand of God, but we're employees of God on that path. But the way we do that, if we're blessed for a good behavior, that'll sanctify God. And to the point that if God punishes for our bad behavior, when we see a correlation between our bad behavior and the punishment, that in itself, in a backhanded way, can also help sanctify God. That's what the Tochacha says later in Sefer Dvarim. So with that in mind, when people talk about, it's just an agricultural holiday, the rabbis made it up, the Matan Torah, I think they're missing a key point in the Chumash, that the theme of 7 and the theme of weeks, calling the holiday weeks, is going back to the first theme of Chumash, of the idea of Shabbat and a week, and counting weeks during that harvest season, and thinking weeks, even when you're not living in the land of Israel, no matter where a Jew is living, and even if you're not a farmer, the theme of how we take God's blessings and what we do with our prosperity, and how we act as a society, and how we care about others, and how we do it in the name of God, those are all key themes which are core to Matan Torah, and the theme of a week starts that theme ever since day 1 in Bereshit, continues throughout Chumash, that idea, and that's how we fight idol worship. That's why it's up in the 10 Commandments. You have one God, don't serve other gods, and you have to sanctify my name, don't carry my name in vain. And then our weekly reminder of that commitment will be Shabbat. Again, that's why Shabbat's in the 10 Commandments, and Shabbat is our reminder of our covenant to be God's people. Remember, it's an od brit between them. So that was my little, I'm trying to explain why the holiday of Shavuot why that's the name of the holiday. And a week is a big deal in Chumash. It's a very special thing. Okay, Rabbi?
Thank you very much. Have a nice trip. Okay, Chag Sameach. Thank you everybody. Thank you again, Ruth. And please God, we'll see you all tomorrow morning, 9:15 a.m. Eastern Time. Tamar Wiseman from Israel, Gila Rosen from Israel, Eric Grossman from Montreal, and Moshe Sokolov from New York. So the United Nations in the positive way. So please, 9:15 to 11:15, also 4 half-hour shiur, and then you can make your cheesecake after that and enjoy. Okay, everybody, thank you. Really, I think it's a wonderful way to spend Motzei Shabbos, any Motzei Shabbos, but especially the one before weeks, Shavuot, Matan Torah, and thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you in the morning, and invite your friends to come tomorrow.
Shavuot tov, toda rabba.
Toda. Okay, Laila Tov, everybody. Shavuot.
So.
Toda rabba.